Most people in the video game industry make stupid tabletop games that you only see in the family section at Walmart. What glamorized career path is actually a complete nightmare? Radio announcer. Like a lot of other jobs in the entertainment industry, it's full-time work for part-time pay. Second jobs are common. Your pizza delivery guy just may be your favorite morning show host. At least, that's how the morning guy at my station made ends meet, until he was laid off in the last round of cutbacks. Now we're a hybrid station, which is the preferred business model these days. That's a fancy way of saying one person does everything while you run a ton of syndicated programs. 12-hour days of minimum wage. Veterinarian. Insanely competitive schooling that cripples you with debt, with a depressing debt-income ratio after graduation. Most of your patients don't like you, and most of the owners think you're getting rich upselling them unnecessary services. Their dogs' exploding eyeball cancer can be cured with raw organic exotic meats, CBD or coconut oil, but you're withholding that information because you're in bed with Big Kibble. High stress, stagnant wages, long hours, bad holiday leave. Rampant depression. Lost count of how many colleagues have committed suicide. Film crew. Yes, you sometimes meet famous people. Sometimes they're cool, often they're really not. The days are 14 or more hours of work with a commute of who knows how long on either end, depending where you're shooting. You have half an hour for lunch. Coffee breaks are whenever you're not needed on set, so depending on your job. I was in camera, and we rarely had a down moment, it could be almost never. More often than not, someone on set is yelling. People lose their minds over making really bad entertainment. You start to work by 7 a.m. on Monday, and by Friday you're coming in at 4 p.m. and leaving when the sun comes up on Saturday. There are no paid holidays, no paid sick days, no paid vacation. If you don't work enough qualifying hours, the union kicks your health care. And this is if you're in a union. Non-union, much worse. Sexual harassment is through the roof, but the kids who get it the worst are afraid to say anything or they'll lose their jobs. I have been told some real horror stories about famous actors, some of whom I still haven't seen get outed by the Me Too movement. And I'm not talking word of mouth, second-hand stories. I'm talking about young women who whisper to each other what shows to avoid and make them swear to never use their name because if they want to work in this industry, they can't be known as a troublemaker. I watched so many coworkers fall into addictions, lose family, miss their children's lives, over the dumbest TV shows in the world. If you go union, the money can be good, but it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. Ballet dancer. Parents spend tens of thousands, or more, on training. They give up their entire teen years in schooling. Most elite ballet dancers are homeschooled and a large percentage move away from home for training in high school. Most dancers you see on stage in a ballet are paying to be there. The bottom rungs of ballet companies are pay to play. Then when you have paid to dance a few years you might be able to get a position that pays you with a dozen pairs of pointe shoes and a stipend for performances. Then maybe you'll be promoted to the bottom level where you get paid $20,000 a year and have no health insurance. All while putting your body through major torture. I don't know if nightmare is the word, but my wife has finally reached her lifelong goal of becoming a zookeeper at one of the top zoos in the US. She is very happy to have the opportunity to hand food to otters, have reindeer eat out of her hand, and brush okapi. However, she took on tens of thousands of dollars in student loans and did months of unpaid work at the zoo to get the job, which is seasonal, requiring she be off 2 months a year. She gets up at 4 a.m. and does farmhand-style physical labor for 8 hours a day for about $9 an hour with no benefits. I am thrilled that she reached her goal, and I am happy that she is happy, but I am pretty disenfranchised with the whole thing. Political staffer. Most jobs in politics pay very little money and require you to work 80+ hours a week for a boss who is guaranteed to have a gigantic ego. You also have to look for a new job after every election day. Also there's a huge brain drain. If you're a legislative staffer for a few years on Capitol Hill, a lobbying firm will double or triple your salary and the money is too nice to ignore, once you start thinking about having a family. So, the best people leave through the revolving door. Those that stick it out and make it into management and leadership are either extremely ideologically driven, too burned out to move, suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, or petty tyrants. I've started working in television from a too young age. It was amazing to witness all the behind-the-scenes stuff, but the reality is that these days you just can't make enough money from performing on TV. Let alone the deprivation of creative freedom, which is what got my show cancelled I think. Sports television isn't much better. Oh, you work in television, it must be amazing. No. The hours are exceptionally long, and worst of all, any time you have off you're spending in your own head getting ready for the next thing. And because it's a dream job, they're able to suppress your wage because everyone wants to do it. No weekends or Christmases gets old after a while too. It's a good way to turn a passion and an addiction, watching football, into something you absolutely despise. Flight attendant. The travel would be amazing, but let's face it. You're a glorified waitress working in a cramped aluminum tube. And long hours. All the insane jet lag will mess up your body beyond imagination. The worst part? In other customer service jobs, the problem customers eventually leave, either of their own volition or by being so over the top they get kicked out. Flight attendants are stuck with the jerks. On top of that, people are generally already in a bad mood to begin with. People get so irrational when it comes to air travel. I've seen attendants get yelled at because the runway was crowded and takeoff got delayed. Like that's somehow their fault. Scuba dive instructor. I did it for 3 years. I can't begin to tell you how many times people wished they had my job. A decent portion of the job was selling. I hate forcing people to buy things, but I had to have a certain percentage of people buy mask, at least. The mask was about 25% of the cost of an open water course. Chances are they'd never use it again. Dive shop politics are insane. I worked 6.5 days a week for 90% of the year. If I turned down a course, I wouldn't be given another until there were no other instructors available. If there were no courses going on, I still had to be in the shop in case someone came in. During slow times there would be 7 or 8 instructors hanging around doing nothing. We all lived less than 5 minutes away. My dive shop would only hire people who were attractive enough. They'd also refuse to hire people who had trained at certain other dive schools in the area. The owners would go out of their way to be charming to the customers and then take the piss out of them as soon as they were out the door. The amount of responsibility is huge, and nobody even thinks about it until you point it out. You're taking 4 people into a deadly environment and have to bring them back in the same state they went into it in. If something goes wrong you can lose your license or go to jail. Where I was working, these were pretty exclusively early to mid-20-year-olds. Not only that, but if someone you trained has an incident at a later date, you can also be investigated and possibly prosecuted. I was diving in 30-degree, 86°F, water. I constantly had an infection. Could be from a small cut, or my ears or my throat. It was constant. Long, very hard work days. 12-hour days were about the norm. I'd teach, be dragging around the tanks I was responsible for, weighing 20 kilograms each as well as tons of other gear, and putting on my be happy around the customer face whilst keeping them from dying. It's like a combo of retail and warehouse work. It also diluted my love of diving. Even when diving with professionals now, I have a hard time not constantly being on alert, waiting for someone to do something stupid, rather than enjoying the dive. Pay is dog poop. It's an amazing job, but it turned my hair gray by 25. Farming on a large scale. I was living in debt up to my butt, ranging from $500,000 to $1 million, depending on the time of year, haggling for every input, land, fertilizer, seed, equipment, at the mercy of the weather. And got to watch the commodity markets kick me in the nuts every business day. The real cherry on top was everyone thinking you were trying to kill them with GMOs and copious amounts of chemicals that we don't use. Not to mention farms are passed down through generations, so you've got a bunch of dead and living ancestors watching your every move. Oh, and a lot of farmers work a second full-time job for the health insurance. There's a reason farm suicides are high and farm accidents are higher. There's a million young rural FFA kids that would give their left leg for a chance to farm. The video game industry. A lot of kids and teens want in it so bad because I grew up playing games blah blah blah, they take me to another world blah blah blah. Then you become an adult and learn that it's all math and physics, and making a video game has nothing to do with what you experienced growing up. It's all black screens of code, polygons, and being criticized for your work. What's worse, if you make games you'd probably never have the time to play them anymore. The gaming industry is notorious for implementing 60 to 80-hour work weeks. Even worse, depending on what company you work for, you may never have stable work. You finish a project and then the company tells you we don't have another project for your particular skill set. Then you gotta look for more work, and if all that wasn't bad enough, you'll probably never work on a game you want to work on. All those big, fancy games and indie darling on Steam are a very small fraction of what exists. Barbie's Horse Adventure? Those people got degrees and were inspired by the same games as you. Crappy Candy Crush knockoffs? Same degree and inspiration. Stupid tabletop games that you only see in the family section at Walmart? Those also utilize game designers and programmers. Don't get into video games because you like video games. Get into video games because you're passionate about math and science. For all of you smart kids with advanced degrees from top 50 colleges, don't go into consulting. You can do better. Find a line of work that is not as soul-sucking and energy-draining. Those frequent flyer miles in free hotels, whining and dining in glamorous suits are just a smokescreen to cover up the misery from constant traveling, networking, guaranteed overtime, and no weekends are not worth it. Many people do it as a stepping stone to a real career, which is smart. Staying in consultancy for 5+ years will likely turn your life upside down. Architecture is really bad. Most people don't complete it and the mental health issues are quite serious. There's a lot of criticism and stress in the beginning, lots of late nights and hard work. At the end of the work you get insulted in public. There's no real reason for this. You aren't going to be saving lives or anything, there's no need to make it so expensive either. So 3 years later, you get a degree and have to do a year of intern work, then it's time for another year of study and projects and exams. Then 2 years of minimum wage work. Then you come back for more exams, essays and projects. It's really too hard for what it is. I get paid very badly and I don't really use any of my training. It was pointless really, but girls like it at parties when I say I'm an architect. That's a lie, I don't go to parties, I have no social life. Someone replied, "Can't believe architect wasn't higher on here." I guess few people know the reality of the profession. Architecture school is tough and ultimately has very little to do with the career. Long hours, mediocre pay, getting sued. Very little time actually doing creative work. Architecture school needs massive reform so people actually get the skills they need and know better what to expect. I'm a professional, full-time voice actor. I'm blessed to be successful and happy, but about 99% of the voice actors I know are depressed most of the time. They are struggling hard to find work, wrestling with imposter syndrome, questioning if they should give up, and barely able to make rent. Particularly video game, anime and animation actors. Investment banking. People talk about the fancy plane rides, expensive dinners, wild parties with your colleagues or a client. The reality of it is you're never truly off work, always on call like a surgeon. Work weeks are usually 60 to 100 hours and can be brutal if one follows another. It's really more like working from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. in an office and then get home to work another bit and have any given presentation ready stat. I've gone all-nighters followed by client meetings where all I have time for is a quick shower and a 7-Eleven coffee. Veterinary medicine / certified vet tech. I was a tech for 4 years and pieced out. The work is backbreaking and clinic-owning vets are cheap. You are bitten, scratched, occasionally left to get a 95-pound dog off the surgery table alone, and if you work in a mixed practice, you can also get the ever-loving hell kicked out of you, and these were the things I was reasonably okay with dealing with. All for a wage that's supplemental at best. Hope you got roomies or a spouse that makes a decent wage. Then you have the owners. The ones who call you nasty names because your clinic doesn't take payment plans since the last 50 people we offered them to never paid and you have the audacity to charge an exam fee at the very least. The ones who don't train their purse dogs and then screech at you when you get bitten because Fifi is a holy terror. And your patient's dying. Some you know it's coming, but you're trying valiantly to save, and some it's totally out of the blue from something like a throat clot after surgery. Or something that we don't even get to diagnose because what's the point of a necropsy for a family pet? There's a reason the suicide rates among veterinarians is so high, and a reason a lot of educated veterinary technicians, basically animal RNs, we did everything but diagnose, prescribe, make a prognosis and perform surgery, don't last very long in the profession. Graphic design. The whole "we're looking for a passionate, creative blah blah designer blah blah" thing is just an advertisement, especially if you're looking for a job at an advertising company. The non-graphic designers only care about the image of the company and their exposure, awards and BS, while making graphic designers work for more hours than what was agreed, not paying them enough, and generally the whole passionate and creative criteria is a bait. You might start as a passionate and a creative human but you'll end up a wreck eventually. Musician. Everyone knows the money is bad, but people think you either starve early and give up, or you're talented and you break out. Not so. There are normal music jobs out there. Unfortunately, they're subject to the following constraints. Number 1. Nobody who hasn't also trained for 20 years knows whether you're doing a good job. Many of them don't either. Number 2. The products produced by the music industry have value. The services involved in producing those products can easily be assigned a value. As a result, you have no leverage in pay negotiations. Number 3. Everyone ignores wage laws, and nobody is interested in enforcing them. The government never enforces them. There is only effective unionism in the US and UK, whereas, for example, in Australia, musicians are represented by the same union which represents actors and journalists, which laughs at the idea of giving a sh about musicians. Number 4. This includes things like state and federal minimum wage overall, not just the sector minimum. It's not uncommon to be making approximately $5 an hour to be working your butt off constantly without breaks. Number 5. You will eventually be able to find work that pays above minimum wage. It will have nowhere near full-time hours. Number 6. You will do as many unpaid hours as you do paid hours, minimum. Sometimes you will do twice as many. Academia in general is potentially a garbage fire career path. Namely because it's so competitive that a lot of people burn out and become shells of human beings just from the stress and pressure of grad school and the job market. A lot of people put pressure on themselves to end up in a top-tier university when that just isn't in the cards for everyone. So many people end up broken. I'd just say that for anyone considering academia after a PhD, be ready to give a lot and get very little in return. Now, all that said, I'm one of the lucky ones and have an absolute dream job, for me, at a middle-level university, not an Ivy or even R1, but public and stable. When I accepted the position, I literally had friends offering me condolences that I hadn't gone to a more competitive place, and I was like, thanks, but I really don't want to spend all of my energy on other people's perceptions of my importance. Sure, I don't get paid a lot, but they also gave my wife a tenure-track job, my kid never wonders where his next meal is coming from, and my colleagues are, for the most part, decent human beings and not just grandhounds. Anything you're passionate about. Business takes the heart out of it, the amount of other passionate people makes it a crabs-in-a-barrel situation. And the thing that used to be a dream escape is now a nightmare you're caged into. Don't make your passion the thing you rely on to make money. Once I figured that out, I started getting jobs that were passion-adjacent. Just close enough that the job is enjoyable but far enough away that when I sit down before and after work to spend time with it that it still feels special. I heard being a YouTuber is pretty bad work. Constant pressure to conform to a mysterious algorithm that's constantly changing around you, and doing or saying something that it, or the advertisers don't like means that the plug is pulled on your wages, possibly even your whole livelihood. Also, the market is massively saturated at this point. So finding something unique and interesting will be more difficult than ever. I've seen a lot of long-term YouTubers struggle with the job mentally. The stress of fan feedback. The stress of actually thinking up ideas that people will want to watch. The stress of putting it together, in particular editing your own voice and face, quickly becomes tedious. The stress of not knowing how long this will last and knowing one bad move could ruin it. I am the official photographer at a famous beauty pageant and it's not as glamorous as it looks. To start off, the girls barely sleep, you can always see them worn out and wearing eye bag patches at rehearsals. At the photo shoots I'm always a hot mess, I sweat. I get dirty because I have to drag around lying on the floor, I run here and there. And on finals night it's a complete chaos. People running around, dressing rooms with clothes all over the place, makeup stains and so on. I know this is sort of the opposite of what was asked, but I've found my best jobs have been the most unglamorous. Spent a few years as a pest and wildlife tech and love the freedom, currently an aerial rigger who gets up high to make cell phones work. Both are bad jobs, but I found them both so rewarding.